It started like any other political event. The room was packed with people, the cameras were rolling, and the air felt heavy with tension. Everyone was expecting a heated debate, but no one could have guessed that it would turn into one of the most talked about moments in recent political history. At the center of it all were two strong voices, Donald Trump, known for his bold and often aggressive remarks, and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, known for her sharp mind and calm confidence. What began as a back-and-forth exchange quickly turned into something much bigger, something that would shake the nation and send shockwaves across every screen in America. Trump had always been a loud and forceful speaker. He interrupted often, dismissed others easily, and didn't hold back his opinions, no matter how controversial. But this time, something felt different. As the discussion grew more intense, Jasmine Crockett stood her ground. She challenged his points calmly, spoke with clarity, and didn't let herself be pushed aside. People leaned in. The room grew quieter. The clash was building, and it was clear that a breaking point was coming. Then, without warning, Trump snapped. His voice cut through the room with a tone that was both dismissive and commanding. "Sit down, girl," he said. 3 words that instantly changed the energy in the room. A silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. For a moment, no one knew how to react. Some looked shocked, others confused, but all eyes were on Jasmine Crockett. Everyone was waiting. Would she respond? Would she walk away? Or would she do something else, something unforgettable? What came next wasn't just a reply, it was a turning point. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't lose her temper, and she didn't back down. Her words were calm, but they carried weight. They didn't just answer Trump, they shook the ground beneath him. As those words spread from TV screens to phones, tweets, and headlines, it became clear, this wasn't just a clash between two people. It was a moment that would be remembered, replayed, and debated for years to come. So, if you think you've heard the full story, think again. Stay with us, because what Jasmine said next didn't just silence Trump, it made America stop and listen. Don't blink. You'll want to hear every word. Before the clash that stunned the nation, there was a stage, a room full of tension, and a conversation that had already begun to boil. The setting was a televised political event, part debate, part discussion, but every bit a power play. Journalists lined the back, audience members shifted in their seats, and millions watched from home, expecting the usual sharp back and forth. What they got instead was something no one could have predicted. Donald Trump, with his usual commanding tone, had taken center stage early. He was known for being unpredictable, cutting people off mid-sentence, and pushing conversations in whatever direction suited him. Over the years, he had built his image on being direct, sometimes harsh, and often controversial. Many in the room had seen it before. They expected him to dominate, to speak louder than others, and to leave his opponents scrambling for words. But this time, he wasn't the only one with something to say. Jasmine Crockett sat just a few seats away, calm but alert, with a quiet confidence that didn't need volume to make its presence known. A congresswoman from Texas and a former civil rights attorney, she was no stranger to confrontation. She had built her career standing up for what she believed in and defending people who had been silenced. This stage wasn't new to her, and neither was the challenge that came with it. The conversation had started on policy but quickly shifted toward topics that carried emotional weight, issues of race, justice, and truth. Trump spoke with his usual force, often dismissing the facts and steering the narrative. He interrupted several times, waved his hand to silence others, and leaned on the crowd's reactions to fuel his points. Some on the panel stayed quiet, others tried to push back but were easily cut off. Crockett didn't rush. She listened, took her time, and then began to speak, clear, direct, and unbothered. Her words didn't just respond to Trump, they challenged him. She wasn't aggressive, but she wasn't timid either. She pointed out falsehoods, questioned logic, and brought the focus back to truth. Each time Trump tried to interrupt her, she held her ground. The tension between them built slowly, like a pot about to boil. Each sentence added to the heat. People watching could sense that something was coming, that this wasn't going to be a normal debate. It wasn't just two politicians with different views, it was a collision of power and principle, ego and courage. As Trump grew more frustrated by her refusal to shrink, the moment everyone would soon be talking about, in headlines, hashtags, and living rooms across the country, was beginning to take shape. As the discussion continued, the energy in the room began to shift. What had started as a political exchange was quickly turning into something more personal, more tense. Trump, growing impatient, began speaking over others more often. Each time Jasmine Crockett made a point, he responded with smirks, interruptions, and exaggerated expressions. But Crockett remained steady. She didn't match his tone. She didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke facts, firm, clear, and direct. The conversation had turned toward racial inequality in the justice system. Crockett, drawing from her legal background, gave examples, shared statistics, and calmly explained how laws were not applied equally to all Americans. She didn't shout. She didn't make it emotional. She let the truth speak for itself. Trump, however, rolled his eyes, dismissed the data, and called it more of the same victim talk. That's when the audience began to shift in their seats. Some looked surprised, others uncomfortable. Still, Crockett didn't back down. She corrected him, pointing out how systemic bias wasn't a talking point but a lived experience for millions. Her words were sharp, not loud, like a quiet storm gathering strength. Every time she finished a sentence, Trump seemed more agitated. He interrupted again, louder this time, saying, "That's not what's happening in this country, and you know it." Crockett responded without flinching, "It's exactly what's happening, and you've chosen not to see it." By now, the back and forth was no longer just political, it was personal. Trump leaned forward, his tone rising, speaking over her with more force. Crockett, still composed, calmly said, "If you listened instead of shouting, maybe you'd understand the difference between opinion and evidence." The room went silent for a moment. Trump looked taken aback. His lips tightened. He straightened in his seat. And then it happened. Trump narrowed his eyes and, in a tone filled with frustration and condescension, said, "Sit down, girl." The words echoed across the room like a slap. They weren't just dismissive, they were disrespectful, loaded, and loud. For a second, there was no response, no sound, not even a cough or a shuffle. The silence was thick, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Crockett didn't move. She didn't blink. She stared straight at him, her expression unreadable, but her silence said more than words ever could. Everyone in that moment knew something had changed. This wasn't just another jab, another insult, or another loud moment in a long political career. It was a line crossed. Something deeper had been touched, something that wouldn't just fade when the cameras turned off. All eyes were on Jasmine. People held their breath. What would she say? Would she walk out? Would she shout back? The tension was unbearable. Viewers at home leaned forward, gripping their phones or staring at their screens, waiting, because whatever she was about to say wasn't just a response, it was going to be remembered. And right then, the country was ready to listen. The room remained frozen in time. Donald Trump's words, "Sit down, girl," hung in the air like a heavy cloud, thick with condescension and arrogance. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was charged. Everyone in the room felt it. Journalists looked up from their notes. Fellow speakers sat still, unsure whether to intervene. Even the moderator didn't speak. The cameras kept rolling, but no one dared to blink. All attention had shifted to Jasmine Crockett. She didn't react right away. She didn't flinch or frown. She simply looked at Trump with a stillness that spoke louder than any immediate reaction could. Her eyes locked on his, her face calm, almost too calm. Then, slowly, She sat back in her chair, folded her hands in front of her, and tilted her head just slightly, as if deciding whether to respond at all. But then she spoke. Her voice was even, no tremble, no rise in tone, just words that cut like a knife, not because they were loud, but because they were clear. "Mr. Trump," she began, "I wasn't raised to sit down in the face of power that abuses its position. I wasn't taught to shrink when spoken to like I'm small. I was taught to stand, not in anger, but in truth." There was no applause, no gasps, just silence, the kind of silence that demanded attention. Crockett continued, still calm, still steady. "You might be used to people backing down when you raise your voice. You might be used to women nodding quietly while you talk over them, but let me be very clear, I am not one of them. I will not sit down, and I will not be silenced, because the truth we're discussing here is bigger than your ego." Trump's expression had changed. He leaned back slightly, his eyebrows raised, not in curiosity, but in discomfort. He tried to cut in with a chuckle, but Crockett raised a hand gently, not in rudeness, but in firm refusal. "Let me finish," she said, not asking for permission, but taking her space. "You call me, girl, to remind me of your power. You say it like it's supposed to make me feel small. But it only reminds me why I'm here. I'm not a girl. I'm a woman who represents thousands of girls who have been told the same thing: sit down, stay quiet, know your place. But I do know my place, and it's right here at this table, in this seat, using this voice." For the first time, Trump didn't interrupt. He watched, his lips pressed into a thin line, his usual smirk gone. The audience remained silent, caught between admiration and disbelief. Crockett wasn't done. "You don't have to respect me," she said. "That's your choice. But you will hear me. You will hear the facts. You will hear the truth, and you will hear the voices of the people I represent, because this isn't just about you and me. This is about every person in this country who has been told to sit down when they tried to stand up for what's right." Her words landed hard, not in a dramatic way, but in a deeply human way. There was no performance in her tone, no theatrics in her delivery, just strength, quiet, powerful strength. Then, as if to seal the moment, she ended with this: "So, no, I won't sit down. Not now. Not ever. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's time to ask yourself why." The silence broke. A soft murmur ran through the room. Some people nodded. A few whispered. Even the moderator looked unsure of how to follow such a moment. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a message, one that couldn't be ignored or brushed off. Outside the room, the internet caught fire. Within minutes, the clip of Crockett's response was being shared across platforms. Crockett claps back with calm fire. Trump tried to silence her and failed. This is how you answer disrespect with grace and truth. Social media flooded with praise. Her words were quoted, repeated, turned into posts, tweets, and reels. Journalists rushed to cover it. Political commentators debated it. Supporters of Crockett called it a turning point. Even those who didn't usually follow politics were watching and talking. It had struck a nerve, not because it was loud, but because it was real. Trump, for once, didn't have much to say afterward. He spoke briefly, tried to laugh it off, but the energy had changed. It wasn't his room anymore. It belonged to the woman who refused to sit down. As Crockett calmly turned her attention back to the discussion, as if she hadn't just delivered the most unforgettable moment of the night, there was no doubt left in anyone's mind. She didn't just speak back, she stood up for every person who had ever been told to sit down. The aftermath of Jasmine Crockett's calm but cutting response came like a tidal wave. Within minutes of the broadcast, clips of the exchange were already circulating online. Twitter exploded. Hashtags like #SitDownGirl, #Jasmine Crockett, and #StillStanding began trending across the United States. People weren't just sharing the video, they were dissecting every word, every pause, every facial expression. The moment had struck a deep nerve, and it wasn't going away. On Instagram, reels of her speech were edited with dramatic music, captions, and reaction videos. TikTok users created side-by-side stitches applauding her strength and composure. Some reenacted the scene, others added commentary about how she had shown millions what it looked like to stand tall without shouting. The internet had crowned her the unexpected hero of the night, not for being loud, but for being unshakable. News outlets scrambled to cover the story. Within hours, headlines covered every screen. Jasmine Crockett silences Trump with poised response. Trump's comment backfires as Crockett steals the moment, the clapback that left America speechless. Mainstream political shows aired replays of the confrontation, slowing down key moments, inviting guest analysts, and asking whether this was just a viral moment or something bigger. On the left, anchors called it powerful and historic. On the right, some called it disrespectful, while others admitted Trump may have miscalculated. Even neutral analysts agreed Crockett had gained massive attention in one night, and she had done it without raising her voice. In Washington, the reaction was immediate. Fellow Democratic leaders praised her for standing firm in the face of disrespect. Several congresswomen tweeted their support. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posted, "That's how you do it. Calm, sharp, powerful." Senator Cory Booker shared the video with the caption, "Strength is not in volume, it's in values." Even some moderate Republicans expressed quiet admiration, noting that Crockett had handled the situation with maturity that couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, Crockett's own social media exploded. Her follower count jumped overnight by tens of thousands. Supporters flooded her comments with messages of respect, encouragement, and gratitude. Fundraising links shared by her team saw a surge in donations. Grassroots groups began circulating her quote, "I'll sit down when justice does." It had become more than a sentence, it had become a statement. Trump, on the other hand, remained mostly quiet in the direct aftermath. His team released a vague statement about how President Trump stands strong against those who twist his words. But the damage was already done. The public had seen the clip, felt the moment, and formed their own opinions. Commentators drew comparisons between Crockett and other powerful women in politics, Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters, even Shirley Chisholm. People spoke about how rare it was to see a woman, especially a black woman, refuse to shrink on a stage where she was clearly being challenged, not just for her ideas, but for her very presence. The moment grew beyond politics. It became cultural. It became personal. It was a reminder of how often women are spoken over, dismissed, or told to sit down, not just in Congress, but in classrooms, boardrooms, and homes. And it showed what happens when someone decides not to accept that anymore. Jasmine Crockett didn't plan to go viral that night. She didn't shout, she didn't insult, and she didn't try to win the moment. But by choosing strength over volume and truth over ego, she ended up doing exactly that. The fallout wasn't chaos, it was clarity. The nation had watched her rise, and they weren't going to forget it anytime soon. What made Jasmine Crockett's response so powerful wasn't just the words she used, it was what those words represented. In that moment, she wasn't just speaking for herself, she was speaking for millions of people, especially women who have been told to sit down, be quiet, and stay in their place. The way she responded, with complete control and dignity, struck something deep in the hearts of those watching. There was something familiar about the way Trump had said it, "Sit down, girl." It echoed the kind of casual disrespect that many women, particularly black women, hear all too often. It wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about tone, about power, about the long history of being silenced. That's why it hit so hard. Because this wasn't the first time someone had said something like that. But it was one of the rare times someone had responded in a way that felt so clear, so composed, and so unforgettable. People weren't just reacting to a political debate, they were reacting to a personal experience that felt shared. Crockett's voice became a mirror for so many others who never had a microphone, never had a platform, never got to speak back. She didn't lash out. She didn't make it about revenge. She made it about standing firm in who she was and what she believed in. That, more than anything, is what made her response powerful. Social media was filled with personal stories from people who saw themselves in her. Women posted about moments in their lives when they were told to stay quiet, during a meeting, in a classroom, or even in their own homes. Some said they had cried watching the clip, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real. Because, for once, someone didn't let it slide. Crockett didn't just stand up for herself, she gave others the courage to do the same. In a world where calm resistance is often overlooked, she reminded everyone that strength doesn't always have to shout. Sometimes, it's in the quiet refusal to bow down. Her response wasn't just a reply to Trump, it was a response to years of dismissal, belittlement, and silence. That's why the moment stayed with people. That's why it went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it felt like justice, even if just for a few seconds. Once people heard her speak, they didn't just remember what she said, they remembered how it made them feel. The dust may have settled after the broadcast, but the ripple effects of that moment are far from over. Jasmine Crockett's words didn't just end a heated exchange, they started a bigger conversation. What happens next is the question everyone's asking. Will this be remembered as a bold stand in a single debate? Or will it open the door to something larger? A shift in how women, especially women of color, are treated in political spaces. Crockett gained national attention overnight, but attention comes with pressure. Some wonder if this will push her into an even bigger political spotlight. Will she be invited to more platforms? Will she lead larger conversations about respect, race, and representation in American politics? And if she does, how will those who once dismissed her respond now? On the other side, there's curiosity about Trump's next move. Will he double down on his comments, as he often does, or ignore the backlash and move on? Will this moment fade from his campaign, or will it come back to haunt him in future debates? For someone used to controlling the room, being upstaged in such a quiet, undeniable way might be something he doesn't forget easily. Beyond just the two of them, what does this moment mean for the public? Will it change how people view political leadership? Will it inspire more young women to speak up, run for office, or challenge disrespect in their own lives? Or will it become just another viral clip, lost in the never-ending news cycle? The truth is, no one knows. But one thing is certain, what happened on that stage wasn't just entertainment. It was a reminder that real power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply refuses to sit down. So, what do you think? Was this the end of the fight or just the beginning? Let us know in the comments. Team Trump or Team Crockett? And if you thought this moment was intense, wait until you see what happens when they face each other again.